In the last lesson, we went over simplifying rational expressions, and basically the procedure was to factor the numerator, factor the denominator, and then divide out like factors. So you wanted your final answer to have no factors common to the numerator and the denominator. Thus, the expression was in simplest form, or reduced to lowest terms, if you want to say that. In this lesson, we're going to look at multiplication and division of rational expressions. The procedure is very similar to what we did in the last lesson. So let's look at the first problem. We're multiplying. So basically all we're going to do is, again, factor the numerators of each fraction, whether you have multiplication of two fractions or more than two. Factor the numerator, factor the denominator of each of the fractions, and then you cancel like factors. You can cancel any factor in the numerator with any like factor in the denominator, regardless of which fraction it's in. Okay, as long as there's one on top, one at the bottom. So one in the numerator, one in the denominator. So the first numerator is x squared minus 2x plus 1. There's no like factor there. So this is a trinomial, and it's going to factor into two factors. At least we assume it will. And again, remember, since the third term is positive, or first of all, there's no common factor here other than 1, so there's nothing I can cancel. GCF is 1, so I proceeded to factor the trinomial, and the third term is positive, so I know that the signs are going to be the same as the middle term, which is negative. The only factors of x squared are x and x. The factors of 1 are 1 and 1, so it makes sense then that we would have x minus 1 and x minus 1 as factors. So instead of putting x minus 1 and x minus 1, I'm just going to put x minus 1 squared. Okay. Same thing as x minus 1 times x minus 1. In the denominator, I have x cubed plus 1. So that first denominator, I'm going to factor out an x. I have a common factor of x, so that'll be x. So that's going to leave me with then x squared plus 1. Okay, in the denominator, well, let's look at the numerator of the second fraction. We have 4x squared plus 4. So we have a 4 common to both terms. So let's take out the 4. GCF is 4. So that's going to leave me in the parentheses with x squared plus 1. Okay, so when you factor something out, you multiply it back. It's supposed to give you the original thing, the original expression. So we multiply 4 times x squared, we get 4x squared. 4 times 1 is 4. That checks out. In the denominator of that second fraction, we have a trinomial. GCF is 1, so I can't factor anything out other than 1, so I proceed to factor this one into two factors. Again, since the first term has a positive coefficient, that's 1x squared, and the third term is negative, then I know the signs here have to be opposite, one positive, one minus. Okay, so I try then x and x for the factors of x squared, and for the factors of 2 would be 2 and 1. And again, since the signs have to be different, I experiment here a little bit, trial and errors. Okay, this is a plus 2 here and a minus 1 here. And always check. X times x is x squared. 2 times minus 1 is minus 2. And then the x here times the minus 1 is minus 1x. 2 times the x is 2x. 2x and minus x is plus x. That checks. Okay, so once you have each numerator and denominator factored out completely, then you go ahead and proceed to factor out or divide out the like factors. So notice x squared plus 1 in the denominator of the first fraction, and there's an x squared plus 1 in the numerator of the second fraction. Again, as long as they're like factors, you can cancel 1 on top with 1 in the bottom. So those cancel out. Those become 1s, okay? So I could just put a little 1 here. Those divide out, it becomes a 1. And then I have two factors of x minus 1 in that first numerator. In the denominator of the second one, I have x minus 1. So this divides out. This becomes a 1 here. And then one of these cancels out. So I'll mark out the 2. That becomes a 1. Divide those out. So what do I have left? I have this is a 1 here, a 4 here, a 1 here for that one. So I have left in the numerator numerical coefficient of 4 and a factor of x minus 1. So I simply put then 4 x minus 1. Okay, denominator, I have x here, this becomes a 1, this is a 1, I got x plus 2. So I'm left in the denominator then for the answer with the factor of x and x plus 2. Okay, so notice there are no factors here that you could cancel out. This x is a factor by itself. X plus 2 is one factor, x minus 1 is a factor, and you have 4. Okay, so since it says leave your answer in factored form, we can leave the answer this way. Now we could multiply this out if we wanted to, if it asked for a different form, and write the numerator as 4x minus 4 and the denominator as x squared plus 2x. But in this case, we leave it in factored form. And then we clear this. Go to the second one. Okay. Now, in the division of fractions, they can write that x plus 3, in this case x plus 3 over x squared minus 4 divided by x squared minus x minus 12 over x cubed minus 8. Or they could write the first fraction x plus 3 over x squared minus 4 and then a division line under that, and then write this below it. It's the same format, okay? But we know that when you divide fractions, you invert, right? And then multiply. And that's because if you have, in other words, you can have fractions in the form a over b, and that's what I've been saying here. A over b, say, over x over y. Okay. So I can write this as a, the fraction a over b, over, which is the same thing as divided by x over y. Or I could write this as a over b divided by x over y. Okay, so this becomes then, if I multiply the numerator and denominator by the same thing, so if I multiply by y over x, and then the numerator by y over x, okay, I'm allowed to multiply the numerator and denominator by the same thing. It doesn't change it. So all I'm doing is multiplying by 1, okay, because these cancel out. So notice this divides out, and this divides out. So I'm left with a over b times y over x. That's why we say when you divide fractions, invert the divisor and multiply, whether you're dealing with rational expressions or numerical expressions. Okay, 3/4 divided by 1/2, for example. You do the same thing. You invert and multiply. That's why in this one I wrote it as x plus 3 over x squared minus 4 divided by this second fraction is the same thing as x plus 3 over x squared minus 4 times this inverted, or times the reciprocal of this. Okay, so here's what we have then. The first one, I can't, the x plus 3 is already in simplified form, so I leave it the way it is. the denominator x squared minus 4, that's a difference of squares, no common factor, but it is a difference of squares. So just like we did in the first lesson, we factor this into the difference, and the sum of the square roots. Square root of x squared is x, square root of 4 is 2. This is x plus 2. Okay. And the next one, fraction, the numerator, no common factor, but it is a difference of cubes. So if you have a difference of cubes, one factor would be the difference of the cube roots. So the cube root of x cubed is x, and the cube root of 8 is 2. And then the second factor will be the square of the first root, which in this case would be x, so you square that, plus the product of those two roots, which would be 2x, plus the square of the second root, which would be 4. Okay. And then we have x squared minus x minus 12. Trinomial. GCF is 1. So I proceed to factor into two factors. The factors of x squared are x and x. The factors of 12 rather, are 4 and 3, 6 and 2, 12 and 1. But the idea is that I want to get a minus x when I multiply it out. So the only option I have, and I know those signs have to be different also because it's a minus 12 instead of a positive 12. So this then would be x minus 4. And x plus 3. Okay. And then again, you're allowed to divide out any factor, any common factor in the numerator of any of the fractions with 1 in the denominator of any of the fractions. Okay, so this x plus 3 divides out with this x plus 3 right here. So those become 1. Okay. This x minus 2 divides out with this x minus 2 on top. Those become 1s. They're divided out. And then what do we have left? Then let me put this over here on top. So in the numerator of the product, I just have 1 times 1 times this factor here. So that's just going to give me x squared plus 2x plus 4. And the denominator, and that x squared plus 2x plus 4 won't factor. Okay, that's as far as we can go with that one. In the denominator, what we have left, of course, is the x plus 2. That one didn't divide out, so x plus 2. Put it in parentheses because it's a factor. And then the x minus 4. And again, we leave the answer in factored format. Okay, so the product of those, or in this case, the quotient of those two fractions is x squared plus 2x plus 4 over the product of x plus 2 and x minus 4. Okay, this will conclude the video. We'll continue with related videos next time. So please subscribe if these are helping you. Thank you.